Well, hello, Amy. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Just pretty good. Just
Pretty good.
not, just pretty good. Not good, but pretty good. All right. Well, as long as you're doing good, somewhat. All right. So today's guest comes from I do a radio show called Real Estate Jerky on iHeart, and my producer's like, I really want you to get connected with a buddy of mine, blah blah blah, and that's how we have him today. So let's bring Danny in. How you doing, Danny?
I'm great. How are you?
You can't. Pretty good. I'm just kidding. That's what she's.
The
Good.
love, the respect, it is so amazing.
There is no respect around here.
It's camaraderie. I think that's what
That's
they
right.
call
That's it.
it over
That's
there.
right. All right. So Amy's first question, I'm gonna mess with her, is always, what service were you in and why did you pick it?
United States Army. And so I listened to your last podcast this morning, and I think the stories were hilarious because I signed up for the Army on 9/11. Initially, I was calling the Marine Corps recruiting, and it was the same thing. It was a recruiting depot that was all the branches were right there. And my naive 19-year-old self said, I know the Marines get up early. Why is no one answering the phone? Well, it was September 11th. One guy was on leave. The other one went to MEPS for a security brief because the threat level went through the roof. Nobody answered the phone. I called the Army, and the rest is history, as they say.
All right. Well, if you go way back, we have, I think it was Brandy, who she joined the service because they gave her a steak for dinner.
I heard that, and that made me laugh. No one gave me a steak. My bonus dwindled down, even though I was getting a security clearance because I waited a month
Right.
to go to basic. So, yeah, no steak.
And I'm going to keep us like this today, this size, and not have you bigger because of the connectivity issues we were having earlier. Okay. Amy, go ahead. I'm sorry.
All right. So, what did you do in the Army?
So I was a forward observer. We're called FISTers. It stands for Fire Support Team. Essentially, you do a math test in the middle of a gunfight to call for bombs, artillery, mortars, air support. It was pretty cool. Definitely a lot of fun.
How long were you in?
I did 7 years. So got out, signed up for the Army on 9/11, went in October of that year, and then got out in 08. I got a little banged up in Sadr City in 06. And I was going to go back for my third trip to Iraq. And they said, you're not good. And I didn't, to be honest with you, I was a little bitter and a little angry, thinking they didn't know what the hell they were talking about. But yeah.
Did they know what they were talking about?
Yeah, I was pretty screwed up. And, I had some brain damage. I'd been in several IED explosions. I got shrapnel on my back. And but my buddies were missing legs and other pieces of them. And I thought, I'm okay. And this is what I was built to do. And they're like, yeah, you're a little damaged, and we can tell, And so they didn't say it quite like that, but essentially what they did was force me out of the Army. And I thought, they were stealing from me. This was my future.
Right. And so how did you take that?
Very poorly. And I had poor coping skills, so I drank. Big surprise, right?
I don't know your story, so I'm just trying to get it out of you. And I don't want, if there's anything you don't want to talk about, just say
We
next.
talk about everything. So I'm an open book, and I truly mean that. So I worked in the oil field. I got a job working for a Fortune 500 company. I was putting explosives in the ground for them, making six figures. But every time I had time off, I was just drinking.
Were you a roughneck? Is that what they call the people in the oil field?
I was a wireline engineer. So roughnecks are uneducated rednecks that we picked from Arkansas, and when you ask them,
that's Amy's hometown. What are you talking about?
I was going to say, well, it's not, and that's very specific from Arkansas.
That's where I was in the Fayetteville Shell, and I would ask those guys, like, teach me some of this crap you guys say out here, like some of these sayings. And they're like what? I said, in California we say hella. So like in Northern California, people's like, oh, it's hella hot today. You mean hotter than a four-peckered billy goat? Yeah, okay. And I got it. I'm gonna write that down and add that to the repertoire.
Where were you from, Northern California?
I live in Folsom. So I was born in Stockton. I graduated high school in Sacramento and moved around a bunch as a kid. But yeah, Northern California, all around Sacramento area.
I'm in Modesto, right?
I did see that you were somewhere here in Northern California. Yeah.
I went to high school in Turlock. That's when I ended up after Colorado. Said, get me the hell out of this valley. I'm never coming back. And, 20 years later, I'm back.
So we'll come full circle to Turlock. But when I signed up for the Army, I was living in Manteca and working in Livermore, and I would drive over the Altamont Pass every day. And I used to joke that I'd rather go to war than spend one more day on 280, 580 in traffic. I was done.
Yeah, nothing like the pandemic to slow that down, but it's back. Don't worry, that traffic is horrible.
I
Yeah.
bet.
It's back up here too. It was great during the pandemic, though. It's like you could get everywhere in 10 minutes.
And you're in Washington, right, Amy?
I am.
Yeah.
One of those people.
They say that about us too.
I know.
Yeah.
That's why I had to say that. Californians.
Yeah.
All right. So you were having some issues when you got out, but and once you said 7 years, I knew something was, because when it's any not even number or whatever, there's always some issue why somebody got out.
Yeah, and it was definitely tough for me to swallow that, because I had a lot of pride and huge ego, and I train guys to take them to war. I don't push paper. I'm not the dental assistant. I go drop bombs, and it was definitely a shot to my ego. But I think more importantly, I needed to start finding new ways to adapt, and I was failing at that miserably. I really couldn't find a path forward where I didn't get overwhelmed at some sort of adversity or obstacle, and that was weird for me because that was not something I was used to.
Before when digressed off to something else, you were talking about in the oil fields and how you're doing what you're doing. Was there anything you wanted to add to that that we got off from?
It was just very similar to the military in that it was a mostly male environment. So I didn't sleep a lot. I still don't, but I worked 100 hours a week in the oil field. This place was perfect for me to leave the military. To be honest, it was probably a great transitional job. And even a potential career, but because of my bad coping skills, it fell apart.
Right. So when did you start taking care of yourself?
After I tried to commit suicide.
Right. So do you want to lead up to that, or
yeah?
So
essentially, I went through a divorce. I lost my job. I knew that the two things I needed in my life were good tacos and the ocean, and they don't have those in Arkansas. So I moved back home and to California.
Where do they have good tacos?
Here?
Yeah.
Oh, there's a million places. My favorite place is Chondo's right over here. And if you come down to the tattoo shop, I'll take you over there.
I actually need a tattoo. By the way. Yeah. I only have one other one, which I got from the Camino de Santiago when I got back. The walk in Spain. Yeah, I did it twice. So I finally got what I got. And then now I want to do one that's so I went to a conference and the guy was saying, be the one, in your family that makes that change to where you're no longer, whatever that is, and everything changes in your family from them going forward. And that's kind of what I want to get. So we can talk about it afterwards. So.
Well, I love that. I'll tell you why. So what we were leading up to was, my job falls apart. Everything I worked for, I'm making all this money and taking care of my family, but I'm struggling. I'm failing at life, and got a divorce, all these things. And so that led me to be hopeless, helpless. I didn't think that I would ever stop this. So I went and filled my prescriptions from the VA, and there were issues there. I had gone to the VA, asked them for help. Essentially, they denied me. I said, well, they know what they're talking about. I must be okay. And I wasn't. But essentially what I needed to do was continue pushing forward and advocating for myself. And I really wasn't in a good place to do that. So when I went down and got my prescriptions filled, my fiance at the time was, I think, kind of on this roller coaster with me, not really knowing which Danny was going to show up that day. And on that particular day, I was done. I'd had enough of life, and I thought, this is never going to stop, this cycle. Just kind of, you were talking about that generational thing. Well, so I tried to take all these pills and kill myself, and ended up in the hospital. I failed at that too. And so I walked in on my dad.
I think you succeeded, but move on. We'll get
right.
Yeah, you're right. It was the best failure I've ever had in my life, right? And it led me to what I'm doing now. But when I was a freshman in high school, I walked into my dad, who's a Vietnam vet, getting ready to kill himself. And luckily we stopped him. He's still here. His dad, my grandfather, is a World War II vet. He was on the USS Hornet in the Battle of Midway and all kinds of crazy stuff during World War II. And he did kill himself when my dad got sent to Vietnam. He's buried in the Golden Gate National Cemetery. And my last name's super rare. It's O'Neill, but it's 2 E's. if you look up my last name and type in Revolutionary War, you're going to find another dumb gunslinger. And that's kind of just what we've done for And it wasn't like my dad was angry with me when I signed up on 9/11. That was not what he wanted. When I told him, he called me a fool, said, "You had no idea what you're getting yourself into." And he was right. I didn't, but it wasn't his choice to make. It was mine. And at the end of the day, I think that he's proud of me serving, but he knew what that was going to cost me. And in the end, that was my friends, right? So my very first squad leader was Jared Monty. He got the Medal of Honor. His parents got it. He got killed saving everyone's life. And, that's a tough pill to swallow. I thought that I could go back and thank him for teaching me my job, keeping my infantrymen safe, and, how to best do that in a chaotic situation. And he did that by stressing us out and creating chaotic situations here. So you train like you fight, right? And he prepared us for things that we were going to see. And then when I thought I would have a chance to go back and thank him for that, he was gone. And it didn't stop there. My next squad leader, the first platoon leader, all these guys that were either my commanders or seniors, they were killed. And then 9 of our guys died in Iraq. I wear dog tags with their names every day of my life. They get me out of bed, remind me what I'm fighting for, because I wasn't, living a life worthy of their legacy and of their sacrifice. And so I quit drinking and started putting myself back together and started exercising and really just changed, essentially utilizing those habits and values that the Army taught me that I had thrown to the wayside when I exited service.
Wow. All right. So everything changed from that day.
Yeah.
Right. And you started doing it. So what are you doing now?
So I own a couple businesses. I own Kinetic Ink Tattoo Company, which I bought from David King. He's one of my best friends. Dave's a firefighter here in Sac. You guys should have him on at some point. But Matt Best from Black Rifle Coffee, Dave was his very first platoon leader. And here we go full circle. On that very first trip where these guys from 2nd Ranger Battalion went to Iraq, there were 2 guys killed in a raid that, essentially Dave was in charge of. And that is Dale Brem, and he's from Turlock, California, and Ricardo Barraza, and he's from Shafter down by Fresno. So they were in Dave's wedding. They're part of his family, and now it's an unfillable void. They didn't get that first beer, first barbecue, or first tattoo when their brother opened his business back here. So we have an Honor the Fallen wall in our tattoo shop. I don't tattoo people. You don't want me drawing on you. But I tell their stories. I say their names, and I make sure people understand that freedom isn't free. And we've added our first responders who have given their life in the line of duty to make the world a better place and our community safer. So we tell their stories as well. I own a t-shirt printing company, and I run Warfighter Overwatch, which is a veteran and first responder nonprofit. The biggest thing we focus on is mental health. I will help guys go to, if you're a firefighter or dealing with PTSD symptoms and you don't want to tell your captain because that's what your insurance requires of you, come see me. I'll pay your therapist. You don't have to tell anybody. And that way, we're not anti-cop, we're anti-bad cop, right? We want to make sure that guys who are having mental health issues go get help. And we want to remove any barriers that they have to that. And same thing for veterans or active duty military. So tomorrow, for example, I'm going to Atlanta. I'm going to take some guys who are in the 101st, and we're going to do 3 miles up, 3 miles down out in Toccoa, where the original airborne guys used to go up. And we're going to have what we call squad recon. Instead of reconnaissance, it's reconnection. We're going to take guys who went to war together, bring them back together. So I didn't go to war by myself. I went for my country, and these are my experiences, but they're America's stories. And if we don't tell them, nobody will know what happened. So we bring these guys back together 6 months later. So essentially what we're doing is we know the number one deterrent for suicide is connection. We facilitate that connection, bring the guys who went through that trauma together, back together, and start unpacking some of that stuff. 6 months later, we bring them and their caregiver or spouse out and start doing some team building, bonding, communication work. And then 6 months after that, just the caregiver or spouse. And because of where we're at here in Northern California, take them to Lake Tahoe or Napa Valley. They can get some wine, do a day at the spa. Just remind them they're the glue that holds this, stuff together, and, keep this warrior forging forward, and reminding them that they're the most vital part of that, because they're the very first responder in that person's life. So that's our cornerstone program. And then we have several others. We have therapy dogs that we provide for our local fire department in Sac. 54 firefighters responded to the mass shooting we had downtown a few months ago. And 8 of them within 72 hours reported symptoms of PTSD. We have no idea how many over the next year, 2 years, 5 years are going to say that night wasn't fun, screwed me up. So we're trying to be more proactive and get these guys when at the academy level, because it's not an if you go through trauma, but a when. You know who to go to, how to deal with it appropriately, so that it doesn't start bogging you down. Because we know that first responders and military have the highest suicide and highest divorce rates, and they coincide, right? So when you get a divorce after that, there's nothing to live for. You're not that active parent every day. It's about you feel hopeless and worthless. So we want to change that in our community, and it starts by talking about this stuff people want to talk about.
Well, and most of us have demons before we got into the military or get into first responder, because not sane people run towards danger like we do. So
100%. So I took this stupid test when I was in college, and it's called the ACE study, and it's adverse childhood experiences, right? So if you have a couple of them, like there's a good chance that you're going to have some sort of like heart disease or like chronic stress and all these things that create chronic disease and problems as you get older, and it kills you early. So it's one test you don't want to get 100% on. I got 10 out of 10. And I knew that meant I had a lot of trauma, but even more importantly, I had to work on this because the behavior that I was exhibiting, my kids were watching. And like you were talking about that generational cycle, it stops with me. We're done with this, right? So whatever it takes, that's why we help not just the veterans, but their families. If the kid's struggling with mental health, a lot of insurances won't cover that. Well, it's not something we broadcast a ton of, but we definitely will help them and their family.
I have a question. Do you ever have couples that both served?
Oh, 100%. So in fact, it's way more common than you would think, right? So then you have kind of a duality where you have maybe one person with a ton of trauma and the other with very little or none, and they're kind of that caregiver role. Or you have both of them have trauma, and you kind of need to treat them as individuals and then as couples, because the communication issues in those relationships it's tumultuous, right? When we talk to people as an NCO or as a leader, it's not always roses and sunshine. I need you to do what we do. It's black and white, and there's not too many questions because this is the mission. If we can provide context and information, great, but there's not always that time, especially in like a combat scenario. And not everything is combat, but that's what the mental focuses are, their brain powers. So I think that we have to do a lot of unpacking with these couples in particular, because they're the ones who have an even higher divorce rate. You don't listen to me. Well, you don't listen to me. And it goes back and forth, and it's pretty hard for them to be successful in a long-term relationship with poor communication. So that's definitely why we focus on a lot of that.
That question was Amy's self-serving question, because she is.
Well,
it is different, and it is.
She's married too.
Right. So my husband and I are both combat veterans, and we went to the first thing, and it was different, because going between the spouses and then like, okay, they're talking too much. And I hate to say it this way either, but domestic things.
Yep.
So then I travel back over to the guys where we would talk more combat things. And then, but I also wanted to give my husband space to bond with the guys and stuff like that away from me. And so it is, but it's something that I don't feel a lot of people realize, like even doing things on post. I have not heard very many times where they've asked how many military spouses currently or have served.
Yeah.
And I think it's more of a thing than people realize.
One of my favorite things is, and you'll see it at the VA, but even more like, especially around Veterans Day or things like this, which we got coming up. So they just assume that the guy is always the veteran. And when you have a female veteran, especially like female combat veteran, and they're like, I'm the veteran. It's, oh, sorry. And I think people just automatically, they assume. Right. They assume that it's the man and he did all this stuff, and they have no idea what women do in the military a lot of times, unless they have someone that they know that served and has talked to them about it. So that's one of the things we want to do, is help bridge those gaps so people do understand a little bit more about what we do. And, because the community doesn't really talk to people or have connections to the military like they did in World War II.
Yeah. And it is funny. So I applaud you and thank you for doing that for the other female veterans.
We have a female veterans hike that we're doing, like, cause there's a lot of stuff that it's tough for me to, I don't know how to provide some resource, military sexual trauma and other things. I want to make sure that we have professionals and that we're doing this the right way to benefit these folks who have this trauma and feel like they're isolated and left out from, well, I wasn't jumping out of planes and blowing stuff up, so they don't care about me. And that's unfortunately the perspective of many females. And I want to change that, in our community as well.
Well, I think females have a hard time identifying, especially if they didn't love their service.
Oh,
But
yeah.
we don't get asked, or we don't even get told, thank you for your service most of the time.
Yep.
It has to be, someone has to go out of their way to do that, or we're just not included. Like you said, I have a coin rack similar to yours, and somebody said something, oh, that's your husband's. I'm like, it's not, it's mine, but thank you. And this person goes, oh, did you serve? I'm like, I did. Thank you again.
Yeah. This one's actually a little bare. So in the tattoo shop, which is right across the parking lot here in the same little shopping center, we have two of them, and one of them was so full, I don't know why, but the stupid 82nd airborne one kept falling off, and it cracked my sink, so we had to move it. It became an issue, and I was like, these freaking airborne guys, I can't quit.
Yeah. My son's airborne medic up in Alaska.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, he ran into a tree last week, and he's still dealing with it. Everybody got blown off course. The wind came up and just took him off course, and everybody went into trees.
Yeah.
So,
That's not fun.
No. He was loving up until then. So,
yeah. The cold stuff I was never a fan of. When I got to Korea, I just thought, hey, somebody screwed up my orders first, and I was supposed to go to Hawaii, and then I was skinny, and that's how I got big muscles, was do push-ups, O'Neill.
Yeah, there you go. No, he's going to JBLM next. So in
Nice.
June. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then Amy can take care of him, make sure he gets where he needs to be.
Yes.
And then I think he's probably done after that.
You got plans for after?
He's going to be a nurse. So.
Good for him.
Yeah.
I didn't, because sometimes people end up, leaving the service abrupt. It's hard to have a plan when that's the case. And, I'm glad they're starting to work on more of that for these younger guys.
Well, and we're also trying to explain to people, you need to have a plan. No, even your plan is to be in 4 years. What happens if that doesn't happen? You need to have a plan in place, because when the service is done with you, they're done with you. There is no, we're going to help you through this process. And we're trying to put together all these different, nonprofits that help together. And that's why we have Help in the Brave, so people know about it. But it's amazing the silos out there that is just, they got this over here, but we don't talk to this person because we overlap that much.
Yeah.
Right.
It's such a travesty, because we know that people leaving service, like the number one thing that they need when they transition is employment, right? Gainful employment. And most of the guys, they don't like it if they're going to go to a company, they want to start them on the bottom level. They like, hey, I've gotten all these traits, I've learned all these skills and, things. So I don't want to start at the bottom. Now, some of that's humble pie, but some of it is understandable. And I think that there's so many more opportunities. My dad got, what was it, selective service or whatever. So like when he went to go apply at the post office, they gave him some points so that he had a small advantage over other applicants. Well, that's great. But there's definitely other things that people can do. I never thought, like I said, you don't want me drawing on you. I'm not an artist. So I never thought I would own a tattoo shop. And it really gives me an opportunity to engage with a lot of our first responders and military veterans who don't know about Warfighter Overwatch, so I can spread the word through that. And I use it as a front to help people, right? So a portion of every tattoo that gets done at Kinetic Ink goes to fund Warfighter Overwatch. I want to make sure that we don't run out of funding so that we can keep helping people. 9 guys died in Iraq, 15 suicides since I've come home. Nearly twice as many guys have committed suicide in my unit. So I'm done burying these guys who, survived war in the craziest days of their life, to come home and hate themselves and, not have any pride in their service. We saw that with the Vietnam vets. We're done. So we're going to fix that. And, it starts with us.
I think it does. I think, and I think it's all of us working together. Like Ed says, it doesn't matter if there's overlap. What the most important part is, if we're shoulder to shoulder making differences and looking at each other in the eyes, we can figure it out. If we're all trying to solve the problem independently, and want all the funding and all the kudos, that's where all the problems, the politics, for the for lack of a better term, comes in. Whereas we just need to work well together and find the modalities that work for each person.
Were you going to say something, Danny?
Well, I was just going to say, I highly recommend people check out the book Tribe by Sebastian Junger, because it describes why we long for, number one, that village sort of atmosphere, environment where, we can ask our neighbors for help, and, but it's hard for us to trust people. The way society has become, you don't know what people's real intentions are, if they're going to use and abuse you. And because unfortunately it does happen often, even one too many times, our brain knows, hey, we better protect ourselves. We don't know what this person's true intentions are, and that stops us from creating meaningful relationships. And at the end of the day, it all boils down to effective communication. So like, my neighbors all know who I am. They know what I do. They know my kids' names. If my kids are out of line, they know how to, number one, you can tell my kid, hey, knock that off. And two, make sure you tell me about it later, and we have that mutual respect. That's the way it was when my dad was a kid, right? In the 50s, your neighbor would they'd whoop the kid's butt if they were doing something wrong. And you still have to worry about dad coming home. So we don't have that kind of accountability anymore. And we've seen that in society where, people are entitled, and we're less considerate of other people.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of that has to do with I do another radio show, and I'm on talk radio. And the issue is I find that they want us fighting so that they can do other things. And that's the problem. In society in general, the people who we put in charge are doing stuff that and I'm not trying to get conspiracy theory. I'm just saying if you get people to fight it with each other, then you don't know what's happening around you. We need to come together as people again, get to know. And I tell everybody, you need to know your neighbors. You don't have to agree with them, but you need to know them. You need to talk to them. You don't need to agree. Nobody has to have the same opinion. I knew many of people would sit down at the same booth, and they would all have different opinions, and nobody fought. Right? It's just a different world. You're right.
Well, we come from the military, right? And essentially what happens is someone gives you some orders once you graduate, whatever school you're, graduating from, and they're going to send you someplace where absolutely nobody. And you are required to learn to work with those people in an effective manner, quickly, swiftly, so you can get your mission accomplished, right? And nobody cares. Task and purpose. You get the job done and move on. And we're going to give you another task and purpose, right? So when we go to the civilian world and people don't get along, they refuse to work with other people. They have terrible attitudes. And I was just like, the world could use a few more Sergeant Odoms or, Drill Sergeant Harrisons to go, put a boot in somebody's butt and say, listen, essentially leadership is getting people to accomplish a common goal, regardless of, background. And I think that that's such a huge failure in our society today that we need to, kind of work more towards that. Just like you were saying, just work better together. Yeah.
That's why I want more veterans in political parties, in different places, because I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. You can work with somebody else because you take the emotion out of it as you're trying to work together to do stuff. Other people can't do that. But vets can.
They can. Bob Dole he's a friend of mine, and we would go to his place in D.C. and eat with him and Senator Elizabeth Dole. And I am very fond of my time with him because of what he represented, right? So, he gets shot up in a plane in World War II. He's got all these issues, and he comes back, and instead of just collecting a paycheck and sitting at home, he's getting after it every day, trying to make, things better. And even if people, like you said, we're not always going to agree with someone 100% of the time, but damn it, if we don't we shouldn't make an effort. I mean, right? Like, isn't it our job, our duty to make sure that we preserve our freedoms and everything that we have for the next generation and the following one? But people don't take that type of ownership anymore. They just assume that the government's doing it right. And you joke about conspiracy theories, but we just assume they're batting 1,000 and telling us the whole truth, and unlikely.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't tell you the truth. You know that. You can't handle the truth. I sit on that wall. Anyway, move on.
Email, you want me on that wall.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Anything else before we go today, Danny? You want to get across?
I just want to thank you guys for having me on and let people know that if they're struggling, if they're feeling isolated and alone, you need to lean into your support system. If you need help doing that, please check out warfighterOverwatch.org and come get involved and in our movement. We really are doing some good work. We're the humble brag. We're nonprofit of the year for 2022, and we're going to keep pushing that forward every single day.
Well, whatever you need, let me know.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Anything else for you, Amy, you want to talk about today before we go?
I just have one other question. How can
Nope.
people outside the state of California get involved with you guys?
So because we work with the military folks, like when you leave service, people are in Florida, Georgia, Texas, right? So we're nationwide. We'll do stuff wherever you're at. Now, obviously, our focus right now is here in California, specifically with a lot of the stuff we do with our first responders, because we have relationships with those agencies. But we're willing to go and talk to anybody and help them with the model and stuff we do. And because we're military vets, I got somebody in every single state, so I can go have someone go visit them and do an in-person visit and help them get involved as well.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you for your service and your time today.
My pleasure. So real quick.
Thank you for your service.
I'll just say this. So we find culturally competent therapists that we work with because we know that, it's important to go to someone who you don't have to try to help them understand all this trauma. They get it already. They've been doing this. And so that's a big benefit. But, yeah.
All right, Danny, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate you sharing your story and what you are trying to accomplish. Thank you. Amy, thank you for being here. And I want to thank you for listening and watching. We really appreciate it. Without you, we wouldn't be here. So if you like what we do, subscribe. And again, thank you for both of you being here.